I would say Vikrant was a unique ship, and even though today we have bigger and more sophisticated ships, I think there will never be another Vikrant.
Air Force is there to show the air power on land, but INS Vikrant showed the country's air power at sea.
Floating airfield, floating city, powerful weapon. You can use any of these adjectives to describe Vikrant.
In the context of Vikrant, no word fits better than pride.
Every time I went ashore and I was introduced, he's a pilot with Vikrant. It is not the pilot part, it's the Vikrant part.
Vikrant, in one word, mother.
Mother.
When the ship is at sea and the pilot's got a very small deck to land on, it's like coming on mother's arms, you know.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You just heard my colleagues express their sentiments. And it is now my proud honor and privilege to talk you through the saga of this iconic man of war, INS Vikrant. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Khaki Heritage Foundation for including this important subject in the series of their talks. I would also like to thank my friend, the director, Maritime History Society, Commodore Khanna, and his very proficient research assistant, Ms. Amruta, for assisting me in visualizing this presentation. A word of thanks to the producers of the Sons of Vikrant, extracts of which have been used quite extensively. Ladies and gentlemen, in the post-era World War II, there were very few nations which could boast of being maritime powers. And the world least expected India to aspire to be one. But taking into consideration the strategic location of the great Indian peninsula in the Indian Ocean, with a long coastline of 7,500 kilometers, innumerable island territories in the Lakshadweep and Minicoy archipelago in the Arabian Sea, and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands in the Bay of Bengal. Superimposed was the exclusive economic zone, the humongous size of 2.3 million square kilometers, resources of which are entirely ours to exploit. All this, ladies and gentlemen, requires surveillance and protection, and hence the need for a multi-dimensional navy. The story of naval aviation began with the induction of the sea-land aircraft in 1953, based at INS Garuda at Cochin. It was in the mid-50s that we got to know of the availability of a semi-constructed, half-constructed aircraft carrier lying mothballed in one of the shipyards in Britain. It was in 1959 that was decided to tow HMS Hercules to the shipyards of Holland and Wolff in Belfast for reconstruction and modernization. The aircraft selected to operate from this aircraft carrier were the fighter ground attack Seahawk, manufactured by Holland and Wolff in UK, and the anti-submarine warfare, the Elysee, manufactured by France. Somewhere around 1959-60 at the same time, the crew were deputed to proceed to the respective bases in UK and France for extensive familiarization and training on their aircraft, that is the Seahawks and the Elysees. 4th of March 1961, the carrier was rechristened INS Vikrant by our Indian High Commissioner to UK, Mrs. Vijay Lakshmi Pandit. The commanding officer, the first commanding officer of the ship, was Captain Preetham Singh Mohindru. After extensive sea trials, INS Vikrant finally sailed for home waters. En route, embarking the Seahawks of the British Isles, that is the 300 Squadron, and the Elysees, the 310 Squadron of the coast of France and the Mediterranean. It was in November 61, 3rd November 61, that INS Vikrant was finally inducted into the Indian Navy, and thus began the era of the fleet era. Because of a sheer size and complexity of maintenance, technical support, administrative support, logistic support, for a huge vessel like this, she had to be based in Bombay, in the Western Naval Command, operating under the flag officer of the Western Fleet. However, the squadrons were shore-based. The Seahawks initially were shore-based at INS Hansa in Coimbatore, later shifted to Dabolim, Goa, once the airfield was handed over to the Navy in 1964. The Elysees were shore-based at INS Garuda in Kochi. Every time the ship had to carry out a workup, an exercise independently or with the fleet or for the squadrons, workup of the squadrons, she would sail out of Bombay, embark the squadrons at sea, and then proceed to her area of operations. During the monsoons, she invariably would be operating on an extended deployment on the East Coast, establishing a temporary base at Madras with the aircraft at Indo-Pak. Ladies and gentlemen, a word about flying from an aircraft carrier, in order to enable you to appreciate the nuances of flying. Unlike the airfield ashore, where the pilot has the luxury of taking off on a long runway, and so landing also on a long runway with all the associated navigational aids and landing aids, it's not so on the carrier. An aircraft does not take off from an aircraft carrier. The aircraft is launched. It is catapulted, as you can see in this picture here. It is actually thrown off the deck within a distance of about 100 to 110 feet of the catapult's run. Similarly, the aircraft doesn't do a landing in its intrinsic sense. An aircraft, the pilot actually carries out a premeditated crash landing on the deck. He flies into the deck, the intention of picking up one of the wires which are strewn across the breadth of the landing run. You aim to pick up those wires with his hook. Ladies and gentlemen, like any floating object, even a huge aircraft carrier like the Vikrant is susceptible to the vagaries of the sea, pitches and rolls. That is something you can't avoid. Just to give you an idea, 1 degree of pitch of INS Vikrant up and down would translate into anything from 8 to 12 feet in height. And don't forget, it is also rolling from left to right. I will now show you a small clip as viewed from the cockpit of a fighter aircraft coming into land on the aircraft carrier. Here is the pilot. He has come overhead, and now he is trying to position himself to come in for a arrestor landing. You will soon see the wake. You can now see the wake of the ship, and you can now see the ship. He's lining up. I can imagine myself flying there, actually. He's lined up center line, got his correct approach, brought his speed down to the correct. He has lowered his hook. And in any time now, he's going to cross the threshold and get arrested as he does now. You see him lurching forward? That was the arrest, ladies and gentlemen. The pilot has landed. When flying like this is carrying on, we have the Chetak helicopters who are available for any search and rescue operations. Ladies and gentlemen, imagine doing this at night. As Alan Shepard very rightly said, flying from the deck of an aircraft carrier at night is what differentiates the men from the boys. And I say this with malice to none. Ladies and gentlemen, now a word about Vikrant's participation in the wars. Unfortunately, in the 1965 war, Vikrant was undergoing a major refit and hence was not available for any deployment. But her squadrons did participate actively. I would like to go back a little, ladies and gentlemen, because there is one very interesting clip which I would like to show you about accidents on Vikrant. Please understand that flying like this is definitely prone to accidents, something unavoidable. Accidents have occurred during landing. Very few have occurred during launch. In this particular instance, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to show you the experience of a pilot on launch. This is the experience of Commander Peter de Braas, now retired Rear Admiral de Braas, when he was commanding 300 Squadron. And I was his number 2, the senior pilot. And therefore I saw this at close quarters, standing next to the catapult when this incident happened. Ladies and gentlemen, over to...
On the rollout, I found that the catapult was not operating to its full capacity. So I let the aircraft roll, hoping that by the end of the 108-foot run, I would get the airspeed that was required, which I didn't. Went nose down over the deck and went into the water vertically, and the ship was moving forward at its maximum speed. In fact, the ship hit me as I went over and made my angle of entry into the water even steeper. I knew the ship was over me. The cockpit filled up with water. It was pretty dark inside, but I waited till I knew I had reached the correct depth. And on ejection, I came out, but as soon as I came out, I hit the bottom section of the ship. My helmet was smashed because of the suction effect of the ship. I was stuck to the ship and moving slowly back. You have big propellers at the back, but the captain of the ship, he took the right action. He went full astern on main engines, so that upset the suction effect, and I was released from the ship's side. The Vikrant carried out extensive trials, catapult trials in Bombay, and I did the full trials of the catapult myself, prove it before anyone else did any operations from the ship.
That was an amazing incident, ladies and gentlemen. As I said, I was standing there on the deck, actually saw Peter going overboard. Finally, he surfaced. His yellow May vest was sighted by the SAR, Search and Rescue Chetak helicopter, which was airborne at that time. And he was winched up and brought on deck. Coming back to the reminiscence of our 1965 war. As I said earlier, Vikrant was not available, but our squadrons played an active part. Elise especially flew intensively for air defense and maritime surveillance in the western sector in support of the Indian Air Force. This was done using their radar called the system, a passive system called the RR, the enemy's radar, without actually giving away its position. It was a great force multiplier and used very effectively in identifying the enemy aircrafts approaching, who had their radars on, and also in directing our hunters and Canberras onto the enemy targets. As regards 300 Squadron was concerned, I remember I was in the squadron then. And on the 1st of September, we were moved to the Air Force Station Jamnagar, ostensibly to carry out armament workup. You know, the Navy did not have an air-to-ground range, and therefore we had to use the Air Force ranges. I remember in 1963, the squadron was deputed all the way from Coimbatore to Gorakhpur for a range workup. Similarly, in this case, we had been deputed to Jamnagar, Air Force Station Jamnagar. As the workup continued, I remember on the 6th of September, we were all hustled into the briefing room and we were briefed to carry out an attack on an enemy radar station just across the border, which was within the range of the Seahawk aircraft, at a place called Bedin. We were all geared up, the aircraft were armed, and just waiting for the word go. But that word never came. Finally, we were told to stand down as there would be no strike that day. We returned back to our mess 6th evening. Whilst having a cup of tea in the lawns of the Air Force mess, we saw these 4 aircraft pull up and carry out a dive. We thought it was the Indian Air Force coming in, but lo and behold, they started bombing us. Ladies and gentlemen, on the evening of 6th September 1965, Air Force Station Jamnagar was attacked, and we were very much in it. Whole night it was under attack by the Pakistani bombers. We spent the night out in the ditches, in the trenches, because all the built-up areas is what was being targeted. An enemy aircraft would come, drop a flare, illuminate the whole base, and then the bombers would come in and have a free run of dropping their bombs. Surprisingly and very funnily, all our Seahawks were parked outside, and none of them were damaged. It was later learned that the Seahawks, with their wings folded, from the air, in the light of the glare, appeared like tents, and therefore the pilots didn't bother to attack them. Very noble indeed, and thankfully so. By the middle of the night, the air headquarters realized that Jamnagar was being attacked only because of the presence of the Naval Air Squadron 300, and therefore orders were sent down to move out of Jamnagar ASAP as soon as possible. So in the semi-darkness of the dawn of 7th September, we jumped into the aircraft, started them up, and gingerly taxied out. Some of us actually being marshaled by the jeep to the takeoff point because the taxi tracks had also been considerably damaged. Finally took off on a damaged runway, and all our aircraft were safely airborne and landed at Santa Cruz the 7th morning. Thereafter, 300 Squadron continued to provide the air cover to the city of Bombay, then Bombay, and the installations and the shipping in that area by providing combat air patrols in the morning and in the evenings. That was the contribution of the squadrons in the 1965 war. Coming to the 1971 war, ladies and gentlemen, a lot has been written, a lot has been said. A lot has been discussed. There is a plethora of information on the 1971 war, which was fought both in the Western Theater and in the Bay of Bengal. But I believe this was not an ordinary war. It was not a war where, borders have changed, lands have been annexed, cultures have been imposed. I believe that this is the only war fought in the history of mankind, and I'm subject to correction, the history of mankind, where two adversaries went to war, the culmination of which created a third independent democratic nation carved out of the vanquished territory. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what we should be proud of. And we who participated in it are doubly proud. The winds of war during this period had started blowing quite early. I remember I was home on leave for the delivery of our firstborn, my wife's delivery of the firstborn, and just within a week of his arrival, I got a telegram. Balance of leave cancelled, report forthwith for duty. And sure enough, within a few days of reporting, Vikrant was outside the harbor and 300 squadron embarked sometime in July, early August, and embarked the Elysees, and we moved along with the escort ships into the Bay of Bengal. As usual earlier, setting up a temporary base in Madras and at Meena for the shore-based aircraft. We carried out intensive training during those days in the Bay of Bengal. That's the time, ladies and gentlemen, if you recollect, there was this Pakistani naval submarine Ghazi chasing us with only one aim in mind. Remember, I don't know how many of you would remember military history. It says, chase the Bismarck. That was the Second World War. Similarly, I guess for Ghazi, it was chase and sink the Vikrant. But she found her own Waterloo in the Bay of Bengal, and we continued with our work. The 4th of December, orders were received for the fleet to go in for the attack. Ladies and gentlemen, at this stage, I think it would be prudent on my part to get the information from those who actually led in this war. I would now like to read out a note I have received from Admiral S.K. Gupta, who was then Squadron Commander, 300 Squadron, in the rank of Commander. I read his note, ladies and gentlemen, which he sent to me specifically for this occasion. On 4th December, the first airstrike by 8 Seahawks attacked Cox's Bazar airfield, which was promptly neutralized. Later, 8 Seahawks neutralized 3 gunboats on the Karnafuli River, leading to Chittagong Harbor, before further wreaking havoc on 2 merchant ships berthed alongside, setting them on fire. The following day, attacks were carried out in 2 waves of 8 aircraft over Chittagong airfield, heavily protected with a battery of anti-aircraft guns. Thereafter, successful attacks with great accuracy were also carried out on riverine vessels proceeding seawards along the rivers of Khulna and Changla. These vessels, which masqueraded as harmless lighters carrying stores, were actually instead transporting escaping enemy troops from the war. On another occasion, the White Tigers were called upon to destroy a large building suspected to be then housing enemy troops, located on a plateau in Chittagong city, close to a hospital. This was successfully attacked by 4 Seahawks, with accurate dive bombing, so also avoiding any bombs landing near the hospital. The war ended on 16 December after just 13 days of hostilities. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll now read out what Rear Admiral Ram Sagar, AVSM VRCNM, has to say. He was then the senior pilot of the Elysee Squadron. On 8 December, I was directed to recce the western sector. I found 6 large merchant vessels anchored in the river harbor of Kulna. I fired 1 rocket on each ship and returned to the carrier to report the presence of these 6 large merchant ships. It was realized that the ships were meant to evacuate Pakistani soldiers to West Pakistan. I and my crew were made to fly the same night at 2 a.m. with 1 more Elysee in company. We attacked these ships, all of whom broke their anchor chains and headed for sea to escape further bombing attacks. All the ships were subsequently captured by INS Bias and taken to Diamond Harbour at Calcutta. On 10 December, I found a gunboat towing 3 long catamaran-type boats full of soldiers camouflaged with tree leaves, heading out towards the eastern sector to escape. I immediately dropped depth charges, and when my plane passed over the gunboat, my aircraft was hit by 20 mm bullets fired by the gunboat. I could see that the flag with the aircraft in a disabled condition, that the gunboat had been hit and they had hoisted a white flag. With the aircraft in a disabled condition, I managed to fly the plane to the carrier and carried out a very successful landing. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Rear Admiral S. Ram Sagar, senior pilot of the Elysee Squadron. I would now like to take the opportunity to introduce you to those from the ship who actually kept the ship running, namely, ladies and gentlemen, the engine room department. You will hear from them personally why I say so. Can I have that clip, please?
Actually, this ship, the design of the ship is such that it needs 4 boiler, full power at no wind condition. One of the boiler, we had a leak. So we discovered that just before the war, when we are doing these trials, then we realized that this boiler cannot be used. Then the problem becomes more difficult because you are doing the same job by 3 boilers, where the ship is designed to give 4 boilers. I had a most wonderful senior engineer, Bhushan, Bharat Bhushan. I've got a wonderful flight deck engineer, Suta. So we all 3 together sat down. We had a discussion with all of us, 3 boilers. Don't forget, we are doing full power trials. Full power trials, when you do it, is done once a year. 3 boiler, that boiler is doing full power trials. Should we do it or should we not? I said, look, what choice have we got? If the boiler bursts, it bursts. We have to make sure that nobody dies. I don't think nobody, at least I don't know, in the history of the Navy, has faced such a situation. It is the war that asked us to take on this task. Peacetime we would never have done. Today, when I think about it, it is much easier to lead, to do things rightly in war than in peacetime. Wartime, your motivation is, I have got to go and get him. Result is, leadership in actual war is easier than it is in peacetime.
And I must say, it was a brave and clear decision by those in the hierarchy of the Navy to have decided to take the risk and sail the ship on 3 boilers. But As you say, fortune favors the brave, and surely it did. Slowly the ship worked up, and by, I think, September, we were all systems go. We had our challenges, we had our failures, we had some major failures. An extraction pump failed while we were rounding off Colombo. Then we had a fan failure, exhaust fan failure in the engine room. It was almost impossible to be in the engine room. But we did take up those challenges and lived through it by sheer guts. And for all this, we were drilled day and night by our seniors. Nonetheless, it was really important that the people below knew the situation and acted accordingly. So every single sailor, every officer was told what to do in an emergency, and the drill was practiced a number of times so that we knew it really blindfold. And when I say blindfold, it is actually blindfold. I remember some of us like young officers like me, and even some sailors were actually blindfolded, left in our cabins, and asked to walk up to the nearest diesel generator compartment so that we can start it independently, even in darkness, should a total power failure occur. So the details to which the training was given, or we were mentally prepared, was enormous. And as it always happens, when you're so totally prepared, the main calamity doesn't occur. And that's what we enjoyed. Actually, we found the actual wartime between 4th and 14th of December a lot more easier to endure than what we went through in preparation. We had some fine leadership at the departmental level. Commander Bilu Chowdhury at the commandery was an example in absolute stoic presence, in the sense he never had to utter a word to get exactly what he wanted done. But the fact is, Vikrant was kept sailing right in the forefront by the engine room department of that ship those days. And the spirit of the department was very high, as reflected in a small incident when the CNS, Admiral Nanda, came down to the engine room to have a word with the sailors and just look around and get a feel of what's going on. And he chatted up on a sailor and asked him, because for the sailor, what's most important is the connect of this family. So he asked him, आपको चिट्ठियाँ आती हैं घर से, मेलमैन लेके आता है? He said, हाँ साहब, हफ्ते में एक बार आता है. तो क्या लिखती है? He said, ढाका जाओगे तो मलमल लेके आना. According to me, it was that spirit which won the war more than anything else. Thank you.
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. That was Vice Admiral Chowdhury, who was then, at that time, the head of department of the engine room department, a very, very critical department, which had to give the power and the speed to you also heard Admiral Krishnan, who was at that time a young officer in the engine room department. Something very important said by both of them. The first one was propounded a great theory in leadership. I don't know if you caught it on, but he said it is easier to lead in a warlike situation than in a peacetime situation, or words to that effect. I wonder how this can be incorporated in the corporate world. As far as Krishnan was concerned, this is the first time I heard that Dhaka was famous for its malmal. Ladies and gentlemen, at this stage, I would like to talk about a personal experience and a personal incident which occurred in that sortie where Admiral Gupta mentioned about an attack on a building on the plateau at Chittagong next to a hospital which was housing the enemy troops. I was number 4 in that formation, being the junior most. In general, any attack which you carried out, once the aircraft gets airborne, there is total radio silence. You cannot converse with anybody within the formation or within the outside agency. And the second thing was that in the returning mode, the receding mode, you don't come back directly to the ship. After the attack, You fly in a particular predetermined direction for a predetermined time at a predetermined speed, and then alter course towards the ship. This is generally to put the enemy off from finding where the carrier is. We went in for this attack, low-level attack, everything normal. Leader went in, number 2, followed by number 3, and then yours truly, number 4, went in for the attack. Correct dive angle, correct speed, correct height. I pressed the button and nothing happened. None of my rockets went off. I had to pull out of the dive. I pulled out of the dive with all my rockets still on board. No sign of the other 3. They had already set course and the predetermined course at that speed. And I could not break radio silence to inform my leader or to seek any advice. I also knew at that time that I could not go back to the ship and land with live rockets on board because that was dangerous for the ship. I then took a decision to go in for a second attack. I went back to the target, did exactly what was briefed. I pulled up, got it the correct height, correct dive angle, at the correct speed. I released my rockets, and sure enough, they all went onto the target. Pulled out of the dive. I now knew exactly what's to be done because I had been briefed. I flew at the correct speed, in the correct direction, for the correct length of time, and then altered course with the squadron, with the other formation nowhere in sight. But at the predetermined time, I saw the wake of the ship. And just at that time, I also heard the leader break radio silence and giving the carrier his position with reference to the aircraft carrier. I looked in that direction, and sure enough, I saw the formation of these 3 aircraft. I positioned myself and slipped into my number 4 position. After that, it was operations normal. Everybody landed as scheduled and as planned. In the euphoria of the successful attack, nobody bothered to ask who the straggler was and why there was a straggler. Everything was forgotten. Ladies and gentlemen, this remained as an untold story for decades. It is only much later, after I had retired from the Navy, that I wrote about this untold story of the 1971 war for our naval magazine Quarterdeck, which was published. Admiral J.C. De Silva, Vice Admiral J.C. De Silva, was then, when I wrote this article, the Vice Chief of Naval Staff. And on reading this article, he writes this postscript. Late Vice Admiral J.C. De Silva. He was then a young lieutenant on board one of the small ships accompanying the carrier. And I read the postscript. December 1971, on board INS Bias, somewhere in the Bay of Bengal. Yes, I clearly remember the day. I was the gunnery officer on INS Bias, an anti-aircraft frigate working with the Vikrant formation as one of the escorts. That morning, we were the plane guard. I was at my position on the gun direction platform. As the sortie took off, many of the crew came out on deck and counted the aircraft as they took off. Bhada and company may have been busy, but for us, it was the longest 40 minutes ever waiting for that strike to return. Then, as the carrier turned into wind for recoveries, we got back into plane guard station and were looking out for the returning sortie. First, the radar reported 1 blip, opening to 3, all positively identified as friendly. Sigh of relief. But where's the 4th? Gloom. The message had already spread through the whole ship. Only 3 have returned. It was morale shattering. Then a few moments later, the 4th appeared. Joy unlimited, hugging and backslapping and shouts of joy. All 4 have returned safely. Every man was confident that we had socked it to them. Well done, White Tigers. Vice Admiral John C. De Silva. Ladies and gentlemen, I mention this because it brings into focus, first, the Murphy's principle, that if things are likely to go wrong, they will go wrong. And secondly, anything can happen in the heat of battle and the fog of war. The war ended on the 16th of December. And ladies and gentlemen, I now show you, I call it a very historic picture of the White Tigers on board Vikrant the day the instrument of surrender was being signed with the captain of the ship, Captain Suraj Prakash, later Vice Admiral Suraj Prakash. This is the 300 Squadron on board Vikrant. The ship on its own, ladies and gentlemen, won 2 Mahavir Chakras and 12 Veer Chakras, something unheard of for just one single unit. Well, after the war, the ships returned back home. Squadrons disembarked. And here's the picture, which was shown to you earlier, of one of the wives receiving a pilot just getting out of the cockpit. The fact that the pilot is yours truly and the lady in question is my wife is purely coincidental. Thereafter, Vikrant continued with her workup and training of pilots and working up with the fleet. During this period, the Sea Kings 330, INS 330, Sea King helicopters, anti-submarine warfare aircraft, also joined us. They actually were commissioned in 1971, but they were still in the stage of working up. And I think, so they did not actively participate in the 1971 war, barring carrying out a little surveillance of the various naval harbors. The Seahawks also had to be, were getting old and were subsequently replaced by the Sea Harriers, the jump jets. And soon the Harrier itself, the carrier itself, went through a major refit, retrofitting a ski jump, basically to enhance the performance of the Sea Harrier. Ladies and gentlemen, like all good things have come to an end. Finally, INS Vikrant was decommissioned on the 31st of December, 1997. And here I'd like to show you a small clip of the decommissioning signal.
And I'll read it out. In a few hours from now, I will come to rest. But in these 36 years, I think I did my best. For my fleet and the Navy, I earned great name. That's why they call me the Lady of Khulna fame. Now I'm going to bid adieu. And with all the good wishes coming from you, though I will be striking down the pennon from the main, I do hope, Vikrant, will be back soon again.
Ladies and gentlemen, INS Vikrant was decommissioned in 1997. Thereafter, efforts were made to preserve, maybe in the form of a museum, something on the lines of the USS Midway at San Diego in the US. Fair amount of effort was made by all concerned, the central government, the state government, the corporate world. Large number of reports were also written, on feasibility reports were written. I understand even Tata Consultancy Services wrote a big, huge, voluminous report on preserving INS Vikrant. In the meantime, the Navy, under its own arrangements, converted Vikrant into a museum. As you see some pictures here with people walking on the deck. This was very popular with the citizens of Mumbai. But, ladies and gentlemen, after a protracted period of 17 years, half the lifespan of an operational ship, no decision was taken. And she finally had to be sent under the hammer and sold as scrap to the highest bidder. Here is what some of my friends have to say.
Reaction on Vikrant's being scrapped was of dismay.
I was very sad, very sad.
Sheer anger.
Now, to send a ship to the scrapyard is almost like condemning a human being to, execution or hanging or something like that.
We tried very hard, but
She's being put to rest, unsung and unhonored.
Yes,
Reaction on Vikrant.
yes, ladies and gentlemen, unsung and unhonored. And it was a very nostalgic visit that I paid to the scrapyard at Darukhana, incidentally an experience by itself. If some of you have not been there, you should go there to see what it is like. Anyway, I was just walking around the scrap that was scattered all over. I actually picked up a small piece for myself. And then a thought struck me. He says, if I can pick up a small piece for myself and keep it in my drawing room, why can't I purchase scrap and build a memorial for the citizens of Mumbai? Great idea, I thought. I discussed this with my friend, Mr. Arzan Khambata, the architect and sculptor, who is known to bring life to metal. He quite liked the idea. He accompanied me back to the scrapyard the next day, identified a few pieces, and we told this dealer that we would like to take these pieces. He says, Saab, ab jaldi se le jaiye, because the scrap was moving out in truckloads out of the scrapyard, and there was no way he could guarantee us the availability of these parts when we came actually to collect it. So Arzan and I, we took a decision and we said, Chalo, I am going to buy this scrap. I purchased this scrap, ladies and gentlemen, not very much of it, just 1.5 tons to 2 tons, and which is not very much when it comes to steel and cables and shafts. Fortunately, the Navy gave me some space to store it in one of their shore-based establishments. And then started the saga of the Vikrant Memorial, which is a story by itself. I started moving. Basically, my idea was to set it up, the sculpture, set it up on a traffic island. So I started discussions with the BMC, and the best way to do it is start from the top. And ladies and gentlemen, I must confess, with all humility, that all the doors, irrespective of whom I went to visit, opened forthwith for me. They were all very cooperative. But I couldn't do it as an individual. I had to take this up on behalf of an organization. So I requested some of my friends, Admiral Arun Prakash, Admiral I.C. Rao, and Admiral M.P. Awati to join me as the Vikrant Memorial Forum, just on paper. And after that, all my correspondence was on this letterhead designed at home on the Vikrant Memorial Forum. BMC, right from the commissioner down to the ward level, including all the other agents, government agencies like BST, the traffic, the Heritage Committee, they all were cooperative and they all made sure the work. I must also a word of appreciation to the Mazagon Docks Limited, who financed this project because it was quite expensive. Financed the project, and my colleagues from the Mumbai Citizens Group, who helped me facilitate the setting up of this model and various technical and administrative reasons. The Navy went out of its way to give me all the infrastructure support that was required to prepare this very prestigiously located in the heritage precincts of the Kala Ghoda opposite the Lion Gate. And this is the memorial, ladies and gentlemen, all made out and sculpted from the intrinsic parts of the aircraft carrier, including, if you notice, the lettering in Vikrant in Hindi. This is the original lettering which was on the Vikrant and the original cables, etc. Everything, the rivets, you can see them there. Here is the epitaph that is written on the memorial. Lest we forget, INS Vikrant Memorial Plaque, 1961 to 1997. In testimony of deep gratitude to a majestic ship which chartered a glorious innings in the service of our nation, from those to whom her deck was a haven of warmth and safety. She played a vital role in the 1971 war, representing India's multidimensional sea power. We, her shipmates, offer this monument to the iconic Vikrant, crafted from a recovered memorabilia as an offering of our everlasting tribute. Ladies and gentlemen, you will appreciate that an iconic ship, it's so much of history behind her, was deserving more than just this small memorial. And with this in mind, on the occasion of the Sharmin Vijay Varsh, the Indian Navy, in particular the Western Naval Command, has put up a beautiful model to scale of INS Vikrant just on the Regal Circle opposite the Maharashtra Police Headquarters. It's a beautiful model, and I request all of you to visit this model in addition to the one which is opposite the Lion Gate. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, as they say, old ships never die. They rest and reincarnate in their new avatar. And so it was with Vikrant. I'm pleased to inform you that the indigenously designed aircraft carrier, built in our own shipyard at Cochin, has been named INS Vikrant with the same pennant number, Romeo 11. I'm also pleased to inform you that she has undergone extensive sea trials and will shortly be joining the fleet. Ladies and gentlemen, the new INS Vikrant. Now, once we were in the process of constructing this memorial made out of the scrap which was purchased from the scrapyard, I thought of an idea of taking a piece of the scrap, I think it was part of the flight deck, and made a memento out of it. I see here, lest we forget. Can you show this to me? Little, I can't read the wording on it. Lest we forget. It says, a part of the old in the new. Ladies and gentlemen, this was presented to the then Chief of Naval Staff to be given to the new Vikrant as and when she is commissioned. And it is my fervent hope and desire on behalf of all those who sailed in mighty Vikrant, that she, this little piece, should adorn and find an appropriate place in the new Vikrant. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for spending your time and giving me this opportunity to present Mother. Jai Hind and God bless.
Thank you so much, Commodore. That was just an absolutely delightful talk about, this most extraordinary ship, and all this, stories about the ship itself and all the people who served on it, and, real courage and bravery. And it was just, I don't think anybody moved a muscle while you were talking. We were all glued to your talk. And I think all the accolades that the ship got, that the servicemen on board got, were really well deserved. And I think the city also owes you a huge debt of gratitude for trying to keep it alive in all the various forms that you have. So thank you very, very much for that. I've got a huge list of everyone who's just salute and respect, and everyone is so proud. Yeah, I think that just, I think there is everyone who is just amazed by this talk, and everyone's really proud of the ship and the Navy. So in terms of a question, I only have one. It says, would you know if there are any plans for the retirement and preservation of the Vikramaditya?
Well, as you know, a lot of efforts were made to even preserve the Virat.
Yes.
But you must understand two facets of this whole preservation theory. Why do you want to preserve it? Is the first question. Vikrant never sailed with anybody else. It was entirely with the Indian Navy. She served a whole life cycle with the Indian Navy. She participated in the in wars, and therefore she deserved to be preserved. Virat, for example. Well, to preserve it towards what end? And what is the purpose of preserving it? What do you want to convert it into? Ladies and gentlemen, you must please understand, and this was precisely why Vikrant could not be preserved. Essentially because a vessel like that needs to be grouted. It cannot remain afloat. The reason why Vikrant finally in 2014 went under the hammer was because her hull was giving way. And if we had not taken action at that point of time, she would have just buckled and sat down where she was in the naval dockyard. You understand the implications of this. So a carrier or any ship for that matter cannot be preserved floating. A ship has to be grounded ashore. It has to be brought ashore and she has to be cemented and grounded. Now, where will you do? Where could you do Vikrant for that? A lot of places were, identified. They had identified, I think, an area near the radio club. They had identified an island across the radio club. But finally, it just didn't work out because you also need footfalls. There's no point in grouting the ship in Kakinada or somewhere. You need, people must go and visit it.
Yeah.
And Bombay is the only city, or for that matter, Chennai, or for that matter, some important cities. That was not happening. So I don't think it is going to be a viable proposition even for Vikramaditya to be. As a matter of fact, and I remember even writing and talking to the defense advisor, the British defense advisor in the British High Commission in Delhi. And I said, look, this ship has fought the Falkland War. She won the Falkland War for you. You need to do something for it. If nothing, buy some spares and put up a monument like we have done for Vikrant. They said, yes, good idea, but that's about all. So this is my opinion about Vikrant. But let's see what happens. As I said earlier, it's a noble thought, but a very utopian thought at the same time, to preserve a ship like Vikramaditya, and towards what purpose and towards what end is what we should talk about. Thank you.
Thank you, Commodore, for clarifying that. And I have one more question. What is the future for aircraft carriers? Do they have to go nuclear? And how do they stack up in this hypersonic missiles, anti-ship ballistic missiles, and nuclear underwater drones?
You know, it's surprisingly that you asked this question, or somebody's asked this question.
Yes,
But recently I was with a naval aviator, and very much junior to me. We met on the golf course, and I told him that I was also from the aviation, and he was from the aviation. We met, and then he says, "Sir, what is the use of having this?" And we talked about this new Vikrant, which is going to be commissioned shortly. He says, "Sir, what's the use? Vikrant is aircraft carriers are done with." I didn't want to take the subject any further because I wanted to concentrate on my game of golf. But here is the question, same question. Aircraft carriers are here to stay for the simple reason that you need sea power at sea, air power at sea. And the only way you can do it is having them integral to the ships that are at sea. It may be in a different format. Okay. I mean, you say they're going nuclear. Okay, going nuclear means what? It will be propulsion will be nuclear. They'll be going faster. So much the better. See, therefore you'll have bigger aircraft flying from them, heavier aircraft flying from them, like we're going to have now. You know, the new Vikrant is going to fly heavier Vikrant because she's a much larger ship than what Vikrant was. You understand? So the aircraft availability will also change, and therefore they will be there. But air power at sea has to be there. No land-based aircraft can give you the kind of instantaneous reaction and cover that an aircraft from an aircraft carrier can, period. And this is my idea.
Okay, actually, while we're talking, a few more questions are coming in. One was, why couldn't corporate India contribute? I'm not sure to what. I think maybe the effort to conserve, like the Belfast in UK, from Rajesh. So was there any attempt to get corporate India to contribute to?
Yeah. No, with all due respect, from the little that I know, there were a lot of offers from the corporate world.
Okay.
There certainly were. And it is the corporate world also who did their own project studies to keep her going. That is why we took 14 years to decide. But you know, as I said, Vikrant, if you had to preserve her, she had to be grouted, and she had to be in a place which was easily accessible.
Right.
To people. You know, you want footfalls. You wanted to put her, there was a move I recollect, I might be wrong, of putting her somewhere near radio club, you know, bringing her in and grouting her somewhere near the radio club. Now, see, imagine the traffic. Can you imagine cars coming, people coming in cars? Where are they going to park them? How are they going to do? It's all interrelated problems. And that is the problem. They say, please, in all fairness to the corporate world, I think they certainly gave a proposal. I also know a couple of names, but there is no point in mentioning them because at this point of time, where is the point in, raising funds? But the corporate world did play a very, very important part. And so did the state government. I don't know if you saw the picture when I showed out. Shri Bal Thackeray was so keen on preserving that he came on board, not once, but many times on board to see what can be done. That was the kind of interest that had, you know, come into the preserving of this aircraft, iconic aircraft carrier. It didn't happen for Virat, and I don't think it will happen for Vikramaditya either.
Okay, I have another question as to, is there any system, or I'm presuming any place you can go to, you know, learn about stories of war heroes like aircraft, ships, and tanks, or any literature any other places?
Well, I think the Maritime History Society, who have co-sponsored this evening's thing, should be able to help out in that respect. I was also told that one of the largest maritime museums and libraries is coming up. Where is it coming up? In Gujarat? Huh? Lothal. Yes, at a place called Lothal. It is going to be the largest maritime museum and library at a place called Lothal in Gujarat. And Maritime History Society, which is at the moment being run by the Navy, is going to be actively involved in it. Well, right now, I think just a call to the Maritime History Society to get some information would be available.
Okay. Well, that's really lovely to know that they're doing something like that. One more question. How many aircraft carrier ships are there in the Indian Navy?
Sorry, how many?
How many aircraft carrier ships are there in the Indian Navy?
No, as I mentioned today, there was, okay, let me tell you, INS Vikrant came in 1961 as a lone aircraft carrier. In 1987, we went in for HMS Hermes, which became INS Virat. So from 1987 to 1997, we had 2 aircraft carriers. Then Vikrant was decommissioned. Then we got Vikramaditya. Which year did we get Vikramaditya? I'm not too sure. But again, we had Virat and Vikramaditya for 2 years. Then Virat was decommissioned, I think, about a year or 2 ago. And so right now we only have Vikramaditya. And soon, in a few weeks' time, we will have INS Vikrant back. So we will have INS Vikrant and INS Vikramaditya, both in the Indian fleet. Till INS Vikrant. Incidentally, the plan for the what is 1 minute? She's given me something. Vikramaditya came in 2013. In 2013. There is a plan for the Indian aircraft carrier. This is IAC-1. That's Vikrant at the moment. She's going to be called Vikrant. She has not been commissioned yet. And therefore, her official designation is IAC-1, Indian Aircraft Carrier 1. Indian Aircraft Carrier 2 is also in the pipeline. And so is Indian Aircraft Carrier 3 on the drawing board.
I see.
Please understand that. So it's not that we are going to lag behind.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to close shop after IAC-1.
Okay. I have more questions now. Were there any POWs from the Navy in the 71 ops? Any prisoners of war?
Sorry, I didn't get you. Sorry.
No, so I said, were there any prisoners of war from the Navy in this 1971 operation?
Were there any?
Prisoners of war.
Prisoners of war from our Navy?
Yes.
No, there were no prisoners of war at all. On the contrary, you remember we spoke about the contraband control in the Bay of Bengal, and we also spoke about attacking those ships which were taking people across and trying to escape from then erstwhile East Pakistan to Pakistan, and those ships were caught and they were all brought to Diamond Harbour. 90,000 prisoners of war which India had, a large number of them were from this catch of the ships where they were trying to return. No, there were no prisoners of war during the 1971 war. There might have been large number of prisoners of war, maybe from the Army and the Air Force, which I'm not aware of.
Okay. And I think your son has written in to say that he's very, very proud of you and this lovely talk. And he asked a question that is there a link of the motorcycle Vikrant to the INS Vikrant? Did they use some of the scrap?
This it was so coincidental that I was busy along with my friends setting up this memorial, and that's when we were buying the spares. And that's when these truckloads of scrap was going out, and no idea where it's going. But whilst I was in the process of setting up this along with Arzan, the people from Bajaj Auto approached us and said, okay, you're setting up this and this is what we are doing. Can we make something of this? I said, boss, whatever you can do. And that is how there was this little synergy, not very much, between the production of that Sons of Vikrant and the Navy as such.
Okay, one more question. What are your thoughts on the sinking of the Ghazi? Did INS Rajput sink her, or did Ghazi's mines cook off while the Ghazi was laying them?
I can only tell you from what I know. Okay, and it's only my view, and I'm expressing it after how many years? 51 years. So I don't think anybody is going to haul me over the coals. But it's a fact that Ghazi sank outside the Vizag harbor. Okay. The question is, what was Ghazi doing outside the Vizag harbor? Vikrant, incidentally, cannot enter the Vizag harbor. Did you know that? Because of her size and the depth of the channel, Vikrant has never entered Vizag harbor. See the intelligence failure on their part. That Ghazi, I understand, was expecting Vikrant to come out of the harbor and then attack her. And for that purpose, she was, as I understand and as I have learned a little, that she was laying mines in the Vizag harbor to blow up Vikrant, ostensibly to blow up Vikrant, but nothing happened. Now, INS Rajput was sent out. We know that INS Rajput dropped depth charges, and there was this big, huge thing. It is anybody's guess. Only commanding officer Rajput knows that. Okay, whether he actually sank it or did Ghazi sink on her own, it's the thing. But as per records and as has been proven, it was Rajput who was sent out to attack Ghazi while she was in the process of laying these mines, and that's how Ghazi was sunk. But in the ultimate analysis, Ghazi had no business to be there, period.
Okay, I think that's it from the questions. Again, I mean, we can go through the chat and just there are just so many messages about congratulatory messages and how absolutely wonderful this.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All the original Top Gun, which I think is great.
Sorry?
You call the original Top Gun, which I think is, and I agree. I think Tom Cruise is not a patch on you. So, thank you very much again, Commodore, for the talk, and thank you everyone for attending. And please keep a lookout for more.
Thank you, listeners, for your thing. Namaskar. Jai Hind.
Thank you.